Several states are taking legal action against the Trump administration's public charge policy that would deny green cards to applicants who receive long-term public assistance. For more insight, let's bring in former oversight counsel at the DHS under the Trump administration and senior advisor at the Heritage Foundation, Mike Howell. Thanks so much for joining us. So I guess just to begin, how impactful do you think this new policy will be as it's rolled out?
I think this is the most consequential action of this administration in the immigration policy area, and perhaps the most consequential action in many decades. That's depending on it being fully enforced and carried out. It has massive implications for, both the incoming legal population and those already in the country.
When you talk about it being fully enforced, what do you think the likelihood is of that?
Well, as with all enforcement, it all depends on the amount of ICE beds and the capacity for ICE to actually remove folks. Right now, Democrats have made it a big policy of theirs to limit the capacity of ICE. So to the extent that those numbers are able to get higher, there's more space for folks to be removed.
Yeah, there's also been a political pushback from the other side of the aisle against this in general. Broadly from, say, folks that are running for the White House, general Democrats, advocacy organizations, and as well as lawsuits. There are a multitude of states, more than a dozen, that have filed, including Washington Attorney General Robert Ferguson, who said this. We've got a little bit of a graphic here. The Trump administration's message is clear. If you're wealthy, you're welcome. If you're poor, you're not. It forces families into an impossible choice to sacrifice their dream of becoming Americans in order to provide health care, food, or a roof over their children's heads, or let their families go without in order to remain in the country. This rule is un-American, anti-immigrant, and unlawful. I intend to stop it. Your reaction that this essentially goes after the poor immigrants?
Well, I would encourage the gentleman to read the actual rule. Within, it's 837 pages. The speed with which these lawsuits came out doesn't reflect a full understanding of what's actually in it. There's still an allowance for, asylum, refugee, these sympathetic humanitarian cases. And it's not asking for immigrants to necessarily be wealthy. It's asking for a modicum of self-sufficiency, to not be reliant on the very limited social services of this country that are reserved for Americans.
Why do you think now? Why the rollout now? I mean, the Trump administration has rolled out a number of policies since they've come in. Some have been challenged by the courts, as I'm sure you've noticed here since the administration has begun. Why now?
Well, that's a great question. First, this was a day one priority at DHS, and coming from the direction of the White House. They wanted to do it right, and in order to do it right, they put it through a very robust rulemaking process. It took, well over 2 years to get where we are now, but now we're on very solid legal foundation. It can survive a myriad of challenges stemming from things in the Administrative Procedures Act to any sort of other legal argument. And if you look at some of the lawsuits that are coming out of California and the far left, they're really making a valid legal claim. These are policy objections. So the administration's on good legal footing because of the deliberative nature they took.
One of the big accusations right now against the president, as well as his administration, kind of broadly is related to racism in general. But specifically when it comes to this policy, a number of immigrant organizations have come out, pushed back, among them the National Immigration Law Center. In a statement from their executive director, she writes, she says, if you are not white and wealthy, you are no longer welcome in this country. Your response to that this accusation has something to do with a broader effort to rein in immigrants from other countries, or if you're not white?
Again, I would encourage her to read the rule, the final rule. It is a racially neutral rule. It doesn't care what color you are, size, shape, or where you're from. It applies to people across the board, whether they're coming from Europe, Central America, Australia, wherever you want. It is racially neutral. It is simply asking that immigrants who wish to come into this country, show that they can be self-sufficient and not a drain on the public services that are reserved for Americans in this country.
All right. Thank you so much. Mike Howell from the Heritage Foundation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.